Okay, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are embarking on, well, a truly unusual exploration, delving into a stack of sources that immediately struck us as something. Well,
Different, definitely different.
this wasn't, a neat package of academic papers or focused reports. Instead, we received this fascinating and frankly somewhat disorienting mix.
Hmm.
We've got German hip hop music, yes, but then tangled up with that are what look like detailed research transcripts dissecting the lyrics, forum posts picking apart a bizarre and chaotic podcast, fragmented logbooks that read like something out of a sci fi thriller, and even hints of analysis transcripts that feel like they could be outlines for further investigations, maybe even future deep dives.
That a real grab bag.
It really is. When I first started going through this material, it didn't feel like putting together a standard report. It felt much more like being handed pieces of a massive, complex, and increasingly unsettling puzzle.
Right.
The sources seem to deliberately pull you in different directions. Music here, a weird podcast there, sci-fi logs over here. None of the pieces seemed to fit neatly together at first glance. It demanded a deeper look, a real attempt to see what lay beneath the surface of each individual source.
Precisely. As you notice right away, the central gravitational pull of these materials seems to be a German hip-hop collective known as Doza Crew.
Yeah, they seem to be the anchor point.
Their music is clearly a foundational element, setting a tone and introducing key themes. But the deeper you read into the accompanying sources you provided, the faster the scope expands. You're quickly drawn into discussions of, well, esoteric German folklore, analyzing the transcripts of a podcast that seems to descend into madness, and encountering fragments that suggest a sprawling, interconnected narrative universe, potentially spanning dimensions or different levels of reality.
It just spirals outwards.
It really does. So our mission for this particular deep dive isn't simply to summarize each individual source in isolation. While each piece is fascinating on its own, the music, the podcast, the logs, the real mystery, and the core request for this analysis lies in understanding how they relate.
The connections, yeah.
Our goal is to analyze the explicit connections between these disparate sources, to find the threads linking Doza Crew's darkly themed music to these strange logbooks, connecting the analyses of that chaotic podcast to ancient mythical figures, and seeing what kind of coherent, or perhaps terrifyingly incoherent, picture emerges when we deliberately put these incredibly diverse sources side by side and look for the overlaps, the echoes, the explicit links.
Exactly. It feels less like just doing a deep dive and more like trying to find the hidden melody or the deep dive within the layers of analysis and commentary that might already exist on these topics individually.
Right, it's like meta-analysis almost.
It's about treating this entire collection as one interconnected data set and seeing what patterns and explicit connections pop out when you view it as a whole. It's about explicitly analyzing the crosstowns between these seemingly separate worlds. So let's roll up our sleeves and begin to unpack this fascinating, strange, and sometimes terrifying collection of sources you've presented us with.
Let's do it.
Let's start logically, where the most concrete and identifiable element seems to reside, with Doza Crew's music itself. Based on the sources, it's grounded in German hip-hop, bringing that raw, energetic sound, but it's immediately clear it's mixed with surprisingly dark, even apocalyptic themes.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just background music, it's narrative and thematic.
Right.
It certainly is. Based on the lyric analyses and interpretations found in the Ewiger Streitzo, Crew lore, and Verborgen melody transcripts you provided, the core thematic landscape is incredibly bleak.
Yeah, bleak is the word.
You find persistent ideas of dystopia, the collapse of society, deep isolation, and a pervasive feeling of being trapped. And this isn't just a physical confinement. The sources highlight it as mental, digital, and emotional. It feels like being trapped within the crumbling walls of society or, the self.
Wow, okay.
We see these themes manifest powerfully in specific songs referenced in your sources. Gang and Loop and Jailbreak, for example, strongly convey that visceral feeling of being stuck in a loop, the desperate, almost frantic need to break free or escape.
That cyclical thing.
Exactly. And hints that a digital revolution might be the only means to achieve that liberation. Mainframe Revolution takes this digital struggle even further, talking explicitly about hacking the system, the power implied by having bits and bytes in hand, with the potential to shape the world.
But there's a catch, right?
Always. But always tempered by the warning that shadows lurk in the background. It frames the digital space not just as a tool, but a battleground where control is contested.
And Ewiger Streifzug or Eternal Roaming March. I mean, the imagery described in the sources is just relentlessly grim.
It really is.
It paints a picture of an endless zombie march through desolate, empty city streets, a profound sense of relentless doom and decay that feels inescapable. There's the idea of grabbing at nothingness, feeling completely lost in chaos.
That quote really stood out to me, too.
One line particularly resonates, quoted in the analysis: Seelen schreien leise im Chaos gefangen, which translates to souls crying softly, caught in chaos. This isn't just about the physical decay of a zombie apocalypse. The analysis points out it's a deep dive into the internal, emotional state of being trapped within that collapse, the psychological toll of living in a dying world.
It's heavy stuff. And it's fascinating to contrast that with a track like Verberjane Melody, Hidden Melody. While it speaks of finding a strange kind of freedom in isolation, even surrender, it's set against this backdrop of biting cold, encroaching shadows.
So freedom, but not exactly cheerful freedom.
Not at all. And a deep, paradoxical yearning for freedom. A Wunsch nach freiem Fesseln. A wish for free shackles. It's weirdly poetic. The sources note the basing in der Luft, the biting chill in the air, is described as a potent warning, an ever-present danger. There's talk of a lonely star, einer Stern, maybe a distant hope, or a solitary guide.
Or maybe just emphasizing the loneliness.
Could be. And a sense of surrender into silent darkness, trägt mich fort in still Dunkelheit. It's a much bleaker, more melancholic take on finding freedom, suggesting it might only be possible in withdrawal, or even dissolution from the world's chaos.
That recurring concept of the Schleif, the loop, is also really significant, highlighted in the analyses of Nebelnacht and Ewiger Streifzug.
Yeah, the loop keeps coming back.
It's not merely about the zombies being stuck in an endless, mindless wander, although that's part of it. The sources emphasize this as a deeply human feeling, too, being cut in the loop, trapped in repetitive cycles, whether they are personal psychological loops, societal stagnation, or the inability to escape circumstance.
Like being on a hamster wheel.
Exactly. It's a feeling of being unable to move forward, just repeating the same patterns.
Beyond the explicit lyrical themes, the sources also point to Dosecrew's deliberate use of unsettling imagery and soundscapes to build their universe. The persistent presence of zombies, the pervasive, almost suffocating fog or nebel, the encroaching shadows.
Yeah, the fog seems important.
And those primal guttural sounds like Gerende Laute, described in the Schattenwesen and shot and basin analyses, all contribute to this feeling of unease and decay.
It's very atmospheric.
Definitely. The fog, in particular, is described in a powerful line. Der Nebel schleicht herein, schluckt die Welt. The fog creeps in, swallows the world. This isn't just weather. It feels like a metaphor for uncertainty, confusion, despair, or maybe even a malevolent force that obscures reality, making it impossible to see clearly or find your way.
Right.
The shadows, with their kratzende Klauen, hungrig und gnadenlos, scratching claws, hungry and merciless, are presented as something predatory, perhaps representing the dark side of human nature unleashed, or external malevolent forces closing in.
Pretty intense stuff.
The analysis points out that this unsettling sonic and visual language isn't just for atmosphere. It's integral to the narrative the music builds.
What's truly striking, as the sources repeatedly point out, is the contrast between these incredibly bleak, dark, and unsettling lyrical themes and soundscapes against, as you mentioned earlier, energetic, sometimes even upbeat or kitschy beats.
Yeah, that disconnect is jarring, but in a fascinating way.
Why combine these seemingly opposite elements? The analyses offer several compelling suggestions. Is it a coping mechanism, a way to find energy or defiance in the face of despair?
Or maybe resistance.
Is it resistance through the very act of creation, bringing life into a dying world? Or is it finding a grim kind of energy within the decay itself? The idea that the music itself serves as a lifeline, something to hold on to or guide you, comes up, suggesting the beat isn't just accompaniment, but an active force.
That contrast is crucial to understanding the emotional core of the music. It prevents it from being pure, static despair. It creates a dynamic tension, a sense of struggle, maybe even resilience. As noted in Nebelnacht, der Beat führt mich nach Haus wieder. The beat leads me home again, suggesting that even in the deepest chaos and uncertainty, represented by the fog, the rhythm provides direction, a sense of belonging or return. It's the lifeline in the loop.
We also see explorations of profound, unsettling transformation, like the description in Infect of the process of becoming a zombie, losing your humanity, experiencing a deep corruption spreading from within.
Yeah, it's not just external, it's internal decay.
It's less about the bite and more about an internal rot. And then intense isolation, as depicted in Fend, being utterly alone in a sprawling, possibly empty city. These aren't just external events, they're deeply internal psychological states.
Finally, the 1187 TRX deep dive analysis highlighted Doza Cruz's extensive and eclectic remix work. They tackle an incredibly diverse range of artists.
Right, that list was wild.
From the industrial shock rock of Marilyn Manson and the breakbeat energy of The Prodigy to the electronic sounds of Daft Punk, the hip-hop swagger of Snoop Dogg, and even the classical grandeur of Richard Wagner.
Wagner. Seriously. Seriously. The sheer breadth of their targets and the imaginative titles they give these remixes suggest a broad, almost borderless musical intelligence and an impressive versatility, demonstrating an ability to engage with and completely reinterpret many different sonic and cultural worlds, pulling them into their own distinct universe.
Okay, now let's pivot significantly because this is where the sources start to feel less like a focused look at a music group and more like pieces of that larger, strange puzzle we mentioned.
Here we go.
We need to discuss their fascinating incorporation of folklore figures into their universe, specifically the Klabautermann. This is explored in detail in the Klabautergarn deep dive and touched upon in the Krulor transcript.
The traditional Klabautermann, as meticulously described in these sources, is a fascinating figure from German maritime folklore, a type of ship spirit, a kobold.
Right, the little guy on the ship.
His name is often linked to Low German words like Pultern, to rattle or make noise, or Kalvertieren, to caulk ships, pointing to his presence and activities on board. He's inherently an ambivalent figure.
Good and bad. Exactly. On one hand, he's helpful. He might patch leaks, predict storms, and guide the ship. But he's also known for being mischievous, unheimlich, or uncanny, causing strange noises, and his visible appearance is often seen as a dire omen, sometimes preceding the ship's doom. He embodies that duality, helpful spirit, and a harbinger of misfortune.
Doza Cruz takes this ancient figure and, according to the sources, gives him a decidedly modern, urban, even digital reimagining.
Yeah, they pull him off the boat.
He leaves the confines of the wooden ship, we're told, entering urban spaces, moving Dirk Beton and technology through concrete and technology. He transforms into this kind of urban explorer, someone who knows the hidden pathways, the forgotten infrastructure, the city's underbelly.
And crucially, he retains his core function from the old myths.
Yeah.
He possesses insider knowledge.
Like knowing the weak spots.
Precisely. On a ship, he knew its structural weaknesses, the rotten timbers, the secrets of the hull. In the modern city, the analysis suggests this translates to knowing the urban landscape's hidden ways, its vulnerabilities, its secret flows. And Doza Cruz explicitly extends this to the digital realm. He becomes a system insider, equally adept in both analog urban spaces and complex digital networks.
So he's a hacker now, too.
Essentially, yeah. He navigates the wires and the data streams just as he once navigated the planks and the rigging.
The sources also portray this modern Klabautermann as an active participant, even a fighter, in this unfolding universe. He's shown battling figures that feel both ancient and modern creatures like Krampus,
Okay.
the old figure of punishment mentioned in Klabautergarn, and nightmare creatures like the Noctel, sometimes fighting alongside a mysterious figure referred to as a Traumtänzerin, a dream dancer.
Fighting Krampus, an ancient, almost elemental force of fear and punishment, in a modern urban setting, it creates this potent collision of old myths and new urban anxieties.
So is he a good guy, a protector?
It's framed that way sometimes. Is the Klabautermann acting as a protector here, a rebel standing against these dark powers, whether mythical or modern-day forces of control and fear? The analysis points to him as a figure of resistance, challenging established darkness.
And his digital transformation is absolutely key, explored in Mainframe Revolution and Klabautergarn.
The hacker aspect again?
He effectively becomes a hacker, navigating the data seas, overcoming firewalls and digital defenses. His traditional talents, his ability to list, lean, or tilt like a ship, to adapt to his environment, to find hidden ways and passages are directly applied to cyberspace.
That's a clever update.
The city and the network effectively become his new ships, vast, complex structures fraught with hidden dangers and secret routes that only an insider can navigate.
However, the analyses also highlight a powerful, darker, and more melancholic side to Doza Cruz's Klabautermann. In Klabautergarn, he's called Slave Signs Hern, a slave of his master.
A slave? To who or what?
That's the question, isn't it? He appears to be constantly on the run, pursued not just by enemies like Krampus, but by memory itself, like the Erforener man, the frozen man in the city, a figure also referenced in Kardar and Krulor.
More mystery.
This adds a significant layer of tragic depth to the character. Is he a slave to his own nature, perhaps forever bound to the structures he inhabits, whether ships or networks? Is he trapped by the burdens of the modern world he now navigates? Or is he enslaved to an actual master, a figure of control within this universe?
So he's complex.
Incredibly complex. His inner conflict makes the Klabauterman incredibly complex, not just a simple trickster or digital rebel, but a burdened figure grappling with his own demons, potentially trapped within the very systems he seems to master.
Building on the incorporation of folklore, the Sandman also appears in this universe, notably in the track titled Sandman, as well as referenced in Pakschlexic and crew lore.
Ah, the Sandman. Not the friendly version, I take it.
Definitely not. Doza Crew presents a significantly darker, more unsettling version of this traditional figure than the one from comforting bedtime stories. He's not just bringing pleasant dreams, he brings nightmares, described as abducting children, leaving sand that causes pain or blindness in their eyes, and even causing hearts to bleed.
Yikes.
Yeah.
That's grim.
It's a chilling contrast to the gentle, soothing figure of popular imagination.
The Klabautergarn analysis explicitly draws a connection between Klabauterman and this darker Sandman. Both figures in this universe exist on the fringes of reality, in the liminal spaces between the known and the unknown, waking and sleeping, urban reality and something else.
Both kind of uncanny figures.
Exactly. They blur lines. The familiar figure becomes uncanny, unsettling.
Hmm.
Both possess the potential for both comfort, in the traditional sense, now perverted, and profound terror. And both seem tied to ideas of fate, destiny, or powers beyond simple human control, acting almost as agents within a larger, often unsettling design.
Agents of destiny.
Yeah. The analysis notes the contrast between the Sandman's subtle, insidious magic of dreams and nightmares versus Krampus's brute physical force, and points out that in Pakschlexic, the Sandman loses this confrontation, suggesting that subtle influence isn't always enough against raw power.
Interesting dynamic. Okay, brace yourselves for a dramatic shift, because this is where the sources take a turn that, on the surface, seems entirely disconnected from German hip-hop and folklore.
Right, podcast stuff.
We need to delve into the Mike's Waffenfacts podcast and the transcripts of analyses dedicated to it, Mike's Waffenfacts transcripts. The sources describe this show as chaotic, wildly politically incorrect, a heady mix of weapons talk, increasingly elaborate conspiracy theories, and apparently heavy drinking among the hosts during the show.
Sounds like a recipe for something.
Yet despite, or perhaps because of this, it cultivated a dedicated, even passionate fan base.
The source analyses paint a vivid and almost unsettling picture of the hosts. There's Mike, clearly obsessed with weapons, portrayed as a storyteller with a crude, often offensive sense of humor. He's described as Grobschleicher, or rough around the edges, unpolished.
Right.
He drinks heavily during the show, which the sources note raises questions about how much is performance and how much is genuine state. There's also a hint from the analysis that he might have a layered past, perhaps an ex-roadie, suggesting a history outside of this bizarre podcast world.
And Rickard, the conspiracy guy.
Then you have Rickard, the resident conspiracy theorist. He's the engine of the show's increasingly wild narratives, prone to heated arguments, often fueled by the on-air drinking. He appears to genuinely believe in every convoluted theory he encounters, no matter how outlandish.
Wow.
Significantly, the sources point out that later in the show's run, Rickard himself starts to voice concern that Mike is losing touch with reality.
Wait, the conspiracy theorist thinks the other guy is losing touch?
Exactly, which is a truly alarming indicator of just how far off the rails the show had gone.
And then there was Ronka, the sound engineer.
And poor Ryanka, the sound engineer. The analyses describe him as the perennial butt of their jokes, a black metal fan, and long-sufferingly trying to keep the technical side of the show together amidst the chaos.
I don't add to.
The sources explicitly state that his eventual exit was a significant event. He apparently couldn't take it anymore, was really upset, suggesting the environment became genuinely toxic or disturbing for him, marking a turning point in the show's already unstable trajectory.
Can't blame him, based on the description.
The sponsor, identified as Schwatten, is another doubly mysterious element. They don't just provide ad reads, they supply the show with items, some described as seemingly quite dangerous or bizarre, which are then discussed or demonstrated on air.
So more than just a sponsor.
Much more. The source analyses strongly suggest Schwatten is far more than just a sponsor. They are an influence, raising profound questions about their true role, their motivations, and their potential agenda in supporting this chaotic platform.
The show's descent into outright weirdness and potentially dangerous territory is meticulously documented in the analyses. The escalation of the weapons focus went beyond standard firearms into experimental and truly out-there concepts.
Like what kinds of concepts?
Well, the sources don't detail everything, but imply things beyond normal discussion. The host's opinions became more extreme and unsettling, venturing into territory like praising dictators, which the sources rightly label as risky territory, and ethically dubious for entertainment.
Yeah, that's uncomfortable.
Then there were segments that were pure, unadulterated nonsense, like the lengthy, heated debate on the legality of using an arch bomb, essentially. A cannonball dive off a building onto an enemy in warfare.
An arch bomb. You're kidding.
Which the analysis describes as pure nonsense, but treated with bizarre seriousness by the hosts.
Rickard's conspiracy theories, in particular, reached stratospheric levels of absurdity, yet he seemed utterly convinced. He believed the Solar Sol and Staff, SSS, which sounds mysterious on its own, was actually alien technology intended for a Mars invasion scheduled for 2035.
A Mars invasion.
Okay. He even started linking his own physical ailments, getting sick, to these sprawling theories, blurring the line between his beliefs, his physical state, and reality itself. The sources highlight the significant debate among the show's audience and analysts. Where exactly was the line between satire, dark humor, and just being offensive or dangerous?
That's the million-dollar question with stuff like this.
Did making this extreme content entertaining somehow normalize or desensitize people to genuinely harmful ideas? It was a real ethical tightrope walk, whether intentional or not.
And then came the end, or rather, the abrupt, deeply unsettling vanishing act that concluded Season 2.
This part is wild.
The analyses describe Rickard, hyped up and seemingly on the verge of revealing a massive truth during episode 600, being explicitly abducted mid-show by unknown figure.
Abducted, on air.
Apparently. The recording cuts out during this chaos, but according to Mike's fragmented account, before his own recording abruptly cuts off, he saw a gigantic meddling gestalt, described as a gigantic metallic or perhaps shapeless figure right there in the studio moments before his own disappearance.
A gestalt? What does that even mean in this context? Shapeless figure.
It's incredibly unclear. The complete lack of clear information about what happened to Mike and Rickard after this fuels immense speculation and theories among the audience and analysts, adding another layer of mystery and horror.
The sources note that the show's audience was large, dedicated, and surprisingly diverse. Not exclusively the boy club, one might expect, with elements of irony or dark humor appealing to a wider range of listeners. But the ethical debate about the content's potential impact persisted, as mentioned.
Right.
Finally, there's the persistent, unnerving rumor documented in the sources about a lost paranormal episode prior to the abduction, described vaguely but disturbingly as catastrophic, disturbing, and unsettling.
A lost episode, of course there is.
A video of this episode reportedly existed but never surfaced, adding another layer of ambiguous potential horror to the show's history. What happened during that episode? What was captured? We just don't know.
Okay, time for another significant shift in the sources you've provided. We now need to introduce a completely distinct set. The NVCRW logbook, #001, and the accompanying Nova Crew Mayday message, analyzed in the Doza Deeper Dive crew lore and Doza Deeper Dive Mike's Waffenfax transcripts.
Right, the sci-fi logs.
This plunges us explicitly into a sci-fi narrative, seemingly unrelated to anything else we've discussed so far.
The NVCRW logbook details a complex story centered around a figure named Tyrant Graphpaste.
Graphpaste, okay.
Described as the most evil ruler imaginable who has plunged their world into absolute chaos.
Yeah.
A small, seemingly ill-equipped team is attempting to stop him. The logbook introduces the team members. Florian, codenamed GRD, described as a spaced-out botanist and pilot.
A spaced-out botanist pilot.
Yeah. Karina, a glitch weapons expert who is prone to hallucinations. And Christian, the high-tech guy who is always described using the term zoodict, implying he's perpetually high or on drugs.
So, not exactly SEAL Team 6.
Not quite. The sources consistently highlight the drug use and resulting altered states of perception among the team members as a significant factor in their story.
Graphpaste's plan to achieve ultimate destruction is terrifyingly simple in its scale, exploding the sun of their solar system.
Go big or go home, I guess.
The team's mission to stop him is a catastrophic failure. The sources specifically attribute this failure to Florian's mistake, linking it somehow to figures or concepts named Lunatic and Tyranninand.
Lunatic and Tyranninand.
Yes.
More strange names.
The consequence of this failure isn't just the destruction of their world. It rips open a wormhole, a tear in reality, leading to a parallel dimension or solar system referred to as Regulus 5.
So they accidentally jump dimensions.
Pretty much. Following the wormhole, the team arrives in Regulus 5. Initially, the logbook describes this new dimension as a seeming paradise. They are welcomed, even hailed as heroes, suggesting they somehow succeeded in escaping or were perceived differently upon arrival.
A paradise after the apocalypse. Sounds too good to be true.
In this apparent paradise, Florian is even reunited with someone named Luna, adding a personal, seemingly hopeful element to their arrival after the apocalypse they left behind. But this is where the terrifying twist is revealed, not in the logbook itself, but in a separate, desperate source, a secret Mayday message recorded by the Nova crew, who apparently arrived in Regulus 5 at some point.
The Mayday message. Okay, this feels important.
This message serves as a direct, chilling contradiction to the logbook's initial description of paradise. The message contains stark, terrifying warnings. A quote that immediately grabs you is, "Regulus 5 is on a folly," and even more directly, "Regulus 5 is a trap."
A trap called it.
The message desperately pleads with the listener, ostensibly you, the person receiving these sources, to read the logbook carefully, strongly implying that the truth is hidden, disguised, or must be found by reading between the lines of the seemingly hopeful account.
The specific warnings from the Nova crew message are explicit and dire. They state unequivocally that Luna, the figure Florian was reunited with and seemingly found comfort with, isn't trustworthy.
So Luna's part of the trap.
Seems likely. They warn that everything is an illusion in Regulus 5, that the paradise is a lie. And critically, amidst these warnings of deception, the message explicitly mentions the mainframe.
The mainframe. There it is again.
The message then cuts off abruptly, consumed by panic, with shouted, fragmented words. Mainframe life, Kiram Doza Odawa. This final desperate phrase, packed with names and concepts we've encountered elsewhere, is a critical point of intersection.
Kiram. Doza. Wow. Adding another layer of horror and complexity are the Grindman expedition reports from Regulus 5, also referenced in the Doza Deeper Dive Mike's Waffenfax analysis.
Grindman expedition, more players.
These reports describe not a paradise, but a horrific widespread disease or condition affecting inhabitants. It leads to a zombie-like state, characterized by loss of mind, leaving empty bodies acting on instinct, and resulting in Shugel wandering, which the analysis interprets as soul wandering, a form of aimless, lost existence.
Zombie-like state, loss of mind, empty bodies. That sounds horribly familiar.
Doesn't it? The reports also mention an orbital portal and a princess figure, suggesting these might be elements tied into the pervasive illusion of Regulus 5. Most unsettlingly, the report ends with a warning about a sulfur smell, often associated with infernal or dangerous presence, and ominously mentions Pandora's box, implying that uncovering or unleashing something here could have terrible consequences.
Sulfur smell and Pandora's box.
Okay.
It's getting really dark.
Great.
This is the crucial part of our deep dive. This is where we move beyond simply summarizing each individual source and explicitly bring it all together, showing the concrete links, the unexpected crosstowns across these incredibly disparate materials.
Connecting the dots.
The German hip-hop, the German folklore elements, the chaotic conspiracy podcast, and the sci-fi logbooks and reports. Here is where these seemingly separate worlds don't just collide, they overlap and bleed into one another in terrifying ways, forming a larger, fragmented picture.
Let's start with perhaps the most prominent, undeniable, and bewildering link. The figure of Kiram.
Kiram, yes.
From the sources we know, Kiram was the sound engineer who replaced Rianka on the Mike's Waffenfax podcast, the one who seemed nervous during that final aborted episode 600.
Right, the nervous sound guy.
The sources also list Kiram as a collaborator with Doza Crew on their album Digital H.
Collaborator with the band.
Okay.
And then, chillingly, Kiram is mentioned by name in that panicked, fragmented Nova Crew Mayday message warning about the Regulus 5 trap in that final cutoff phrase, mainframe life, Kiram Doza Odawa. Okay, let's analyze this nexus point. Kiram is not just a minor character or technician in one source. He is a figure explicitly bridging three wildly different domains. The chaotic reality-bending MWF podcast, Doza Crew's artistic output in universe, and the potentially cosmic, interdimensional events happening in the Regulus 5 dimension.
He's the common thread.
He really seems to be. The questions this raises are enormous. Was he just a technician caught in the wrong place at the wrong time in the MWF studio? Or did his role as a sound engineer and collaborator give him access or knowledge that connected these worlds? Did he know about the trap in Regulus 5? Was he somehow involved in the events there, or even instrumental in the Nova Crew's fate or warning?
His nervousness makes way more sense now.
Absolutely. His nervousness, described in the analysis of the E600 video snippet just before Rickard's abduction and Mike's vanishing, takes on a completely new, deeply terrifying meaning when you connect it to being named in a panicked warning originating from another dimension about a trap and the mainframe. It suggests he was aware, perhaps implicated, or in imminent danger from the same forces operating across these different levels of reality.
Okay. Next, let's connect the concept of the mainframe. As we discussed, Doza Cruz lyrics, particularly in tracks like Mainframe Revolution and Gang and Loop, repeatedly explore the idea of fighting or escaping a digital prison, being trapped within a vast controlling mainframe.
The digital prison idea.
Then, the Nova Cruz desperate Mayday message, warning about the Regulus 5 trap and stating everything is an illusion, explicitly mentions the mainframe as part of the immediate danger or context of the trap.
This connection is far too strong to dismiss as coincidence. Is this the same mainframe? It appears to be presented not just as a simple computer system, but a vast, controlling entity, perhaps a digital prison or structure that exerts influence or control across multiple realities or dimensions.
So the songs might be literal.
It seems possible. The parallel suggests that Doza Cruz's seemingly metaphorical or dystopian lyrics about fighting or being trapped in a mainframe might not be just social commentary or allegory. They could be describing the actual controlling force or structure that is explicitly warned about as part of the interdimensional trap in the sci-fi logbook and Mayday message. Their art could be a reflection or even a warning about this pervasive transdimensional entity.
Then there are the pervasive zombie and decay themes that run through these sources. Doza Cruz music is saturated with imagery of zombies, eternal wandering, loss of mind, physical and internal decay, and unsettling transformation, as seen vividly in tracks like Uiger Streifzug, Infect, and Schattenwissen.
All that bleak imagery we talked about earlier.
And chillingly, the Grindman expedition reports from Regulus 5 explicitly describe a disease causing a zombie-like state, characterized by a direct loss of mind, leaving empty bodies acting on instinct, and resulting in that same aimless, shuggle wandering.
This is a powerful, explicit parallel that demands attention. Doza Cruz's artistic depiction of a zombie apocalypse, which feels tied to societal decay and the loss of human identity, directly mirrors the description of a horrific disease found in the seemingly parallel Regulus 5 dimension.
It's almost too perfect a match.
How is this possible? It strongly suggests that Doza Cruz's lyrics and artistic universe are not purely fictional creations isolated in our reality. They could be chronicling, describing, or somehow tapping into events and conditions like this zombie-like plague that are actually happening in these other terrifying realities or dimensions. Their art might be a conduit or a mirror for events spanning this interconnected universe.
Let's also explicitly connect the pervasive theme of illusion and fragile reality that emerges across the sources. The Nova Cruz Mayday message explicitly states that everything is an illusion in Regulus 5, that the paradise is a trap based on deception.
Right, the trap world.
Doza Cruz music repeatedly blurs the lines between reality and dreams, explores the uncanny, and presents distorted or manipulated realities. Think Kaleidoscope Your Traum or The Dark Sandman.
It's a Sandman connection, yeah.
Even the Mike Sloffenfax podcast, in its chaotic nature, contains strong elements of blurred reality. The constant debate over whether the host's antics were genuine or performance art, the possible fictional nature of characters like Gas Bold mentioned in the analysis, and the profound ambiguity of the bizarre reality-bending ending.
This theme of an unstable, manipulated, or illusory reality appears in different forms, but consistently across all the source types you've provided. It strongly suggests that the universe hinted at by these materials is one where the very nature of what is real is questionable or subject to manipulation by unseen forces.
Like reality itself is the trap.
Perhaps. The twisted Sandman figure from folklore, already presented as an unsettling agent of dreams and nightmares by Doza Cruz, could be more than just a metaphor. Perhaps he is an actual agent of this pervasive illusion, a figure who actively works to blur the lines between dreams, nightmares, and perceived reality across different levels of this universe.
We can also explore potential character parallels based on the analysis transcripts. The NVCRW team members Florian, Karina, Christian are explicitly described as using drugs and experiencing resulting altered states of perception.
The Zoodict crew.
This echoes the detachment from baseline reality seen in the Mike's Waffen Facts hosts, particularly Mike and Rickard, whose states of mind appear to be heavily influenced by their documented heavy drinking, belief in wild theories, and interaction with the strange props supplied by Schwatten.
So let's analyze this connection. Could the MWF hosts, in their chaotic, detached, and potentially altered states of mind, be mirroring or even subconsciously influenced by figures struggling with perception in another dimension like Regulus 5?
Are they like echoes of each other?
Are they perhaps archetypes individuals whose detachment from conventional reality makes them susceptible to glimpsing or interacting with elements of this larger, strange universe? What does this suggest about the impact of this reality, or lack thereof, on its inhabitants across different dimensions? It implies that altered perception might be a key or even dangerous way to interface with the underlying nature of this universe.
Consider the mysterious Schwatten, the sponsor of Mike's Waffen Facts, and Tyrant Graph Paste from the NBCRW logbook. While their roles seem different, one a sponsor providing strange items, the other an apocalyptic ruler, both appear to be figures of significant, often malevolent, influence or facilitation. They introduce dangerous elements or cause chaos.
Analyzing this, could these figures represent different manifestations or agents of a similar kind of malevolent force or facilitator operating across different levels or dimensions of this narrative?
The Puppet Masters.
Maybe. Schwatten, by providing dangerous props and exerting influence, seems to be fostering the chaos and extremity in the MWF world. Graph Paste causes world-ending disaster leading to interdimensional travel and traps. Both are catalysts for unsettling or disastrous events, hinting at a coordinating intelligence or power behind the scenes, pulling strings and introducing destabilizing elements across realities.
Revisit the abrupt, bizarre, and terrifying end of Mike's Waffen Facts. Rickard's abduction by unknown figures, Mike seeing a gigantic meddling gestalt in his studio, Kyram's documented nervousness just before the end.
Right, the Gestalt sighting. When we analyze these events explicitly through the lens of the NVCRW logbook and the Nova Crew Mayday message, the ending of MWF takes on a chilling new dimension. It no longer feels like just a bizarre podcast stunt, a drug-fueled hallucination, or even a simple government crackdown.
It feels a bit...
The abduction by unknown figures, and Mike's description of a vast, metallic, or shapeless gestalt, strongly suggest interference from something immense, powerful, and non-human. Could these be the same forces behind the Regulus 5 trap, or agents of the mainframe itself?
So the podcast studio became a doorway.
It implies that the chaotic, reality-bending environment of the MWF studio somehow became a weak point or an unexpected intersection point where these larger, terrifying events from potentially other dimensions could manifest and directly interfere. The mundane reality of a podcast studio was breached by cosmic horror.
The phrase Doza Odawa, mentioned in the Nova Crew Mayday message right alongside Mainframe Life Kirim, is another direct, unexplained link back to the Doza Crew.
This phrase, uttered in a moment of desperate panic in another dimension during a warning about a trap in the mainframe, is a critical piece of the puzzle. It directly connects Doza Crew's name, their artistic output and universe, to these sci-fi mystery elements.
So they're directly involved somehow.
It reinforces that this isn't just a case of their music commenting on similar themes found elsewhere. The crew themselves, or at least their name or something associated with them, Odawa being an unknown element, seems to be directly involved in or connected to this larger conflict, this trap, this reality-spanning mystery.
Finally, the Grindman report's chilling warning about Pandora's box and the existence of supporters in the shadows adds a profound meta layer to the entire tangled mystery revealed by these sources.
Let's analyze the implication of that warning. It suggests that investigating this entire mystery, piecing together these disparate sources, explicitly making these connections, might itself be a dangerous act.
Like we could be opening Pandora's box.
Are there forces, the supporters in the shadows, that actively don't want these connections to be made, this larger picture to emerge, this underlying terrifying reality to be understood? This echoes the Klabauterman's darker side, the Sandman's unsettling presence, and the implied influence of figures like Schwatten and Graph Paste.
So the mystery itself is dangerous.
Perhaps these figures, or the very ambiguities and contradictions within the sources, are warnings to back away, agents of forces that prefer to remain hidden and unchallenged, manipulating things from behind the scenes across multiple realities. Opening Pandora's box by making these connections might unleash something terrible.
Pulling it all together explicitly, these sources, when analyzed not in isolation but for their deep, unsettling interconnections, are not just separate stories. They are fragments of one enormous, complex, potentially terrifying reality.
It's a mosaic of
A
weirdness.
reality where figures from ancient German folklore navigate modern digital spaces, where chaotic, politically incorrect podcasts unintentionally intersect with cosmic abduction events, and where seemingly parallel dimensions are not paradises but traps filled with illusion, decay, and zombie-like disease. It's a multi-layered narrative hinted at, perhaps deliberately, across different forms of media and documentation presented in your sources. The explicit analysis of the crosstowns between these sources reveals a universe far larger and more interconnected than any single piece would suggest.
Too.
So, we've taken a deep dive into this truly unique stack of sources you provided, and by explicitly analyzing and linking the myriad connections between them, the crosstowns, we've uncovered a universe far more vast, complex, and strange than any single source suggested on its own.
It's quite a web.
From German hip-hop exploring urban decay and digital rebellion, to ancient ship spirits turned urban hackers, to chaotic conspiracy podcasts ending in abrupt, terrifying abductions, to sci-fi logbooks revealing interdimensional traps and zombie plagues, it genuinely feels like it's all part of one vast, fragmented picture.
To reiterate the key connecting threads that stood out when we explicitly put these sources side by side, the figure of Kyram, the sound engineer and music collaborator, who is named in a dimensional warning.
Kyram's the linchpin.
The pervasive concept of the mainframe, appearing in both dystopian music lyrics and critical interdimensional alerts, the chilling, almost identical parallels between Doza Cruz's artistic depictions of zombies and decay and the disease described in the Regulus 5 reports.
The zombie connection is strong.
The overarching theme of illusion and fragile reality that runs through the music's uncanniness, the podcast's ambiguity, and the parallel world's deceptive nature, and the terrifying intersection of seemingly disparate events, particularly the MWF ending, suggesting that chaos in one reality can somehow become a focal point or entry point for forces from elsewhere.
And Doza Odawa. Can't forget that.
And of course, the direct mention of Doza Odawa itself in the Mayday message.
And naturally, analyzing these connections only leads to more, perhaps even larger, unanswered questions left hanging in the air. What is the mainframe, truly? Who or what is behind it, pulling the strings and weaving these illusions?
What happened to the Nova crew?
What exactly happened to the Nova crew after that Mayday message cut off? What is Kyram's full role, and did he survive? What is the significance of the Doza Odawa phrase?
And the Gestalt, what was Mike seeing?
What was the gigantic meddling gestalt Mike saw just before he vanished? How does Tyrant Graph Paste fit into the larger structure of control hinted at by the mainframe and Schwatten? So many questions.
So many. But by focusing specifically on how these sources connect, how the ideas and characters spill over from one to the next, we've moved beyond individual mysteries to glimpse a picture of a universe where nothing is quite what it seems, where control, illusion, and decay are pervasive, and where different levels of reality might bleed into one another in unsettling and terrifying ways.
It's like peeling an onion made of nightmares.
Something like that. These weren't just separate pieces of fiction or documentation in isolation. By looking for the crosstowns and analyzing the explicit links, they coalesce into something that feels like fragmented pieces of a much larger, potentially hidden truth.
This deep dive has revealed startling, hidden connections within what appear to be fictional worlds or disparate media projects based on the sources you provided. But perhaps the most provocative thought for you, the listener, is this. In a world saturated with information from countless, seemingly disconnected sources, news, social media, entertainment, conversations where might you find unexpected connections, hidden illusions, or subtle warnings by explicitly analyzing how different pieces of information intersect?
That's a good point.
Keep questioning, keep looking for the threads that link things together, even when they seem wildly disconnected at first glance. The truth might be hidden in plain sight, scattered across the sources you encounter every day.
We strongly encourage you to revisit the sources yourself, listen to the music mentioned, look for more clues and connections. This exploration of an interconnected reality based on disparate sources is far from over. The deep dive continues.